You want to take a picture with Coach Asano?
Perfect.
He's still
Thank you.
sticking around.
Hold on, Trent. You start recording this?
Good.
Oh, that's perfect.
Okay, you ready to go?
Hang on, let me get
Oh,
this shut.
all right.
Yeah.
So if I do this again?
We're both leaving if you do that again. And you're on your own camera-wise.
Let's see.
All
That
right,
should do her. Okay, I think we're ready.
20 minutes?
Okay, you ready to rock?
Yeah. Yes, sirree. We're good.
Okay, Trent, let's, all right, first of all, I want to go back and talk about your dad. He's like the father of Penn football. Before Chris, he was there, and Corey and I have had the conversations over the years, and I lost mine in January.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And I'll tell you what, he was my hero, as your dad was too. But I'd like just to talk about, and once again, didn't get to know him as well as I know Chris, just because of my job's dealing with the head coaches and roles. But all the Wally stories that I have heard, humorous, hard-nosed, and I can go on with about 15 other different types of
Old
characters.
school?
Old school.
Yeah.
All right, so let's just talk about Wally Yeoman, the father, Wally Yeoman, the position coach, and Wally Yeoman, one of the fixtures of Penn.
A great leader, a great disciplinarian, but at the same time, a great father. He'd hug you, put an arm around you when you needed that as well. As you can imagine, Corey and I got in a few things that we probably shouldn't have. And he was tough, but he was also understanding and led us down the right path. So he was a great dad.
Marilyn Yeoman.
Very competitive, I think more competitive than people would realize, other than the people that sat around her in the bleachers. I've heard stories about fans, Penn fans, getting on coaches, and between her and Jane Giesman, they would let them know that that wasn't something that they should be doing. So she was very competitive and instilled that competitive spirit in us.
Chris tells the story about Jane and Marilyn going down, prior to the team going down to state, and every mile putting yard signs, if you will, out to, I mean, those are just the little things that the coaches' wives, moms did.
Yeah.
Just share your thoughts on that.
A lot of behind the scenes stuff that, I mean, if you weren't there with them, you wouldn't have known that they were involved and stuff like that, but they did a lot of other things like that behind the scenes. The time management that had to go into making dinners for when not only your husband, but your kids are coming home from practice, all that stuff, the laundry, I mean, the list just goes on and on, without ever a complaint. Always motivating us to, you're thinking about maybe not playing this sport, sitting down talking to you, what are you thinking? Not telling you you need to do it or you don't need to do it, but look, we need to talk about this, and just great mom.
You were the first of the brothers
Yep.
to kind of lead the way, so share the family dynamics between you and the brothers. And were you the better athlete? Were you the jokester? Where were you at in this big picture?
I guess thinking about high school, I was probably the better student. I don't know that I can say that I was a better athlete. I played quarterback and I also played defensive back while I was at Penn. I was not as into weightlifting as Corey and Todd became. They were much more home in the weight room than I was. Corey played football and wrestled. I played football, basketball, and ran track. And then my brother Todd played football and wrestled when he was younger. So to say who's a better athlete, we all had different skill sets, I think would be the best way to, politically correct way to say that.
But you guys were all active, and the only thing you have ever known is Penn.
Yeah. Well, in terms of going to school, yeah, I mean, when I was born in Rensselaer, Indiana, my dad was a coach there. That's part of Chris's background as well.
Right.
Then my dad moved to Marion, Indiana. And then we moved to Decatur, which I believe was his first head coaching job. And then we moved to Southern Indiana, Bedford, Indiana, when it was actually Bedford High School before it became Bedford North Lawrence. He was the head coach there for 6 years. And then we moved up here in the early 70s and became part of Roger Reynolds' staff. And then Chris came and things changed.
Okay, so putting on the Penn helmet for the first time, what do you remember?
Trying to figure out if I was going to be a quarterback or a defensive back. I was playing behind a young man named Dennis Groening. Pretty much had the starting quarterback job, so in my junior year I started at a defensive back. And then my senior year, again, kind of going back and forth between being a quarterback and a defensive back. My dad was the defensive back coach. Went in and talked to Coach Giesman, and he wasn't in his office because I wanted to kind of get this figured out, what were we going to do. And Coach Charlie Lori, who was the defensive coordinator at the time, was at Penn when I went in. So I sat down and talked to him a long time and ended up playing defensive back. I don't know if that had anything to do with him being a defensive coach or not. And somebody else took the quarterback reins that year.
Can you share the things that were discussed that you were privy to between Chris and Wally as they made that transition from taking the program over, no wins the first year, to being, immediately making an impact?
One of the things that I can remember from the years prior to Chris getting here to when Chris came was there was a much more, I guess you would say, funneled and focused effort on what we were going to do. And speaking of just basically offense, we were going to do few things, and we were going to do few things well. And I can remember them having conversations about anything that you notice that a kid does well, we need to celebrate that. And they did. A bunch of different offenses. I can't tell you what they all were because I was pretty young at the time, but in the previous years, but then when Chris got there, I mean, it was, this is what we're going to do, very few things, but we're going to do those really, really well.
All right, so they mentally, emotionally changed the culture of the program. Do you think there was a defining team, a defining moment, or do you think it was just a building block along the way? Was it Corey's group in '79 that when they went to the Bricky Bowl and played in that game, the most infamous games of all time?
Yeah.
What do you think about that journey?
I think up to that point, one of the other things Chris installed was the 2 platoon system, which had not been in place, and that played a huge role. Number one, I think it got a lot more kids to come out and enjoy football, because now instead of just being 11 to 15, 16 guys that were going to be on the field, now you're guaranteed of having at least 22 guys on the field, and plus all the special teams. I think that was huge. So a lot more kids came out, for one thing. Kind of lost my train of thought there.
That's welcome to my world.
I forget your question, I'm sorry.
No, I wanted to touch base about another thing. The transition from being a Penn player, going off to taking care of the education, and then now coming back and being a coach. Was the culture different as a player, not as a long-time coach?
The player, or the difference between being a player and a coach is you're not behind closed doors with coaches when you're a player. I mean, there's conversations that go on as coaches that don't happen between coaches and players. That's the one thing. But in terms of The goals that are involved, no, absolutely the same. Being a coach and making sure that all the kids buy into what those goals are, and being a motivator. I personally don't think that motivation is one of my strong suits, but Chris is always trying to help me out with that as well. So I just, from being a player to becoming a coach, I guess it's just, you take more of a long-term look at things as being a coach versus when you're a player, you know you have a very limited amount of time to do what you want to do in terms of your goals. But when you're a coach, you've got goals for this year, but you've also got goals for the program for as long as that program lasts, and you want to make sure that you're continuing to build those goals.
What's your favorite Penn moment?
One of my favorite moments, I sat here and listened to Jeremy talk about his. It's so hard to name a Penn moment. I still remember that Ben Davis game in the state championship. That was one of my favorite things that I look back on. The biggest thing I've got out of Penn football is the relationships, not only with the kids that I played with, the coaches that I played for, the coaches I coached with, the coaches I've coached against, the officials I've worked with, the fans, the parents of players. Just the relationships here are unbelievable.
Perfect. That's the soundbite we wanted.